everyone, it's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. It's Monday night. I'm looking at Aptera's Twitter page and I looked at their Facebook page. There has been nothing new about Gamma, unfortunately. So we're gonna have to wait. I get the feeling Aptera is kind of slow rolling this and are gonna release information about Gamma very slowly over a long time. That's just my guess. Um, but unfortunately, I was waiting all day for something to be released today about Gamma, and it didn't happen, so we have no new Gamma information to look at. However, over the weekend, we do know that, as expected, the Inflation Reduction Act passed the Senate. Um, as expected, 50 yays and 50 nays, so it's an even split. So then, by procedure, if the Senate is in a tie, the vice president, who acts as the president of the Senate, acts as the tiebreaker, and that's Kamala Harris, and she voted yay, so it passed. So it passed the Senate as expected with the exact number of votes we expected. And so this looks like it's headed to the House, which there it's expected to pass fairly easily. So it looks like this is going to become law, at least in some form. I don't know that there's going to be many changes to it. Many of you guys wrote into your representatives asking for an amendment or a change to extend the credits to three-wheeled vehicles, which would make Aptera eligible. I honestly think that that's a long shot, but I think it was worth a try. I mean, I spent 10 minutes doing it, and a lot of you guys spent 10 minutes or so doing it, and you know what? It was worth a shot. Um, Nothing lost except a little bit of time by doing that. Maybe it'll happen, and that'll be great. But I kind of want to just briefly go over this bill and mainly over the parts that affect Aptera and EVs. But I just perused the bill because I think it's important. It's a big bill. It's going to affect most of us that live in the United States. So they're going to have a bunch of tax credits for and for like renewable energies, geothermal energy. That doesn't really affect us too much. They're going to have more incentives for companies that paid, depending on if they pay their workers, and offer credits for manufacturing steel and iron and other components in the U.S. So they're trying to encourage more domestic production of these kinds of things, which I guess is a good thing. Um, then they are giving tax credits for residential clean energy expenses like rooftop solar, heat pumps, small wind energy, and other like improve the energy efficiency of your home. I'm personally all for that. Um, and then they're gonna also re they're gonna let more fossil fuel production happen. So that's kind of not in keeping with the rest of the bill in terms of climate, but I think this is some compromises they had to make to get this to go through. And then, okay, so there cost some cost increases, so that they're gonna have the oil companies are gonna have to pay a little bit more royalties to the U.S. government, basically to us, for using public lands to produce fuel, which I think that's probably a good thing. We all know that like national forests are basically being gouged by private companies for wood production, so at below the market rate for public lands. So I'm guessing the same thing is happening for fossil fuels. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it that closely. And then healthcare. This is something that I'm involved in. I work for a healthcare related university. So they allow Medicare to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies for lower prices. That's kind of a no-brainer. Every other country in the world does that. And it's like shocking to me that we haven't been doing that. So that they'll allow that. I think that's funny because this thing's called the Inflation Reduction Act, and it basically does very little to do anything with inflation. But this is the one place where actually it might help costs for people, this negotiation of drug prices. But I don't really know that it does actually anything for inflation like the name says, other than that. And then drug costs are capped, but largely only for Medicare. A thing is they try to cap patients' insulin costs at $35 a month. America currently has 3 times the price of insulin of any other country in the world. It's kind of insane. Um, mainly because we can't negotiate prices, and insulin isn't regulated. Insulin is a basically a necessary drug for diabetics that are insulin dependent. Without it, they just die. And so I think that they should control the cost of insulin, and it's not an expensive drug to make or anything, and it's not like it takes research and development to do it. It's an old drug, and it's not expensive to make. But basically, they wouldn't let it extend to private insurances. The Republicans didn't want that for whatever reason, and it's going to stay. The cap only applies to seniors on Medicare. Okay, and then large corporations are getting this 15% minimum tax. That's basically going to hit like the big internet companies pretty hard because they've been dodging that. Um, they're going to give the IRS $80 billion to enforce. So I think more people are going to get audited. That kind of sucks, but that is what it is. Um, and then stock buybacks are going to get additional tax. A lot of big companies, when they get a lot of cash, instead of paying their employees more or investing in R&D more, they buy back their stocks, and that increases payouts to their executives and to their shareholders. So that's been a practice that's been criticized. And then, of course, the private equity sector, um, Cinema got that carried interest loophole. She wasn't going to allow that to close, so that's not being changed at all. Okay. Anyways, the important thing here for us was the tax credits of up to 7,500 are offered to consumers who buy electric vehicles, but this credit comes with stipulations that make it difficult for vehicles to actually qualify. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, because there's been a rash of articles today with titles like "No electric vehicles on the market today qualify for the new EV tax credit," and the Democrats' new inflation bill includes tax credit for electric vehicles that don't exist, and it's possible that no electric vehicles will qualify for the new tax credit with no grace period, so credits effectively end once the bill is signed. So the ironic thing about this bill, at least in terms of the EV tax credit, is the idea is to try to get more people to buy EVs by reducing their apparent cost by giving a tax credit. Currently, lots of cars get EVs get this tax credit. Tesla, GM doesn't, Nissan doesn't, because they've already hit their 200,000 car mark. And the previous credit was based on how many cars you sold, and then it phased out after 200,000 cars. And so many of those companies have reached 200,000 cars, so they were no longer getting the tax credits. So this gets rid of that number, which seems good in that um, then everyone could theoretically qualify. But the bad thing is for us, it's limited to cars with at least four wheels, which Aptera doesn't have. And then the more problematic thing here is that you need to have their batteries have at least 40% of their materials and their components sourced from North America or a free trade partner by 2024 to be eligible for this tax. And by 2029, it would have to be 100%. Okay, so they want it to go into effect within about a year. They need to have their entire supply chain changed, and then if it has any components that are produced by China, then it's off the table. That basically means that almost no cars are going to qualify, because there's almost no car that's going to have a mineral component that is 40% made from the US or one of our free trade partners, which are one of those 20 countries that we talked about in the previous video. The two countries of most interest for this would be Australia and Chile, because they have large lithium deposits. But here's the problem, is that China currently um, controls the vast majority of lithium and nickel and cobalt in the world. It's mainly through this thing that's called the Belt and Road Initiative. They started this back in 2013, and essentially what they did is they realize that in order to become an industrial powerhouse, and this is actually like pretty prescient of um, the Chinese government to do this, and it's similar to what the U.S. had been doing. They're essentially what they're doing is they're kind of bribing developing countries or resource-rich countries by like building them roads and infrastructure and railroads and factories and refineries and things like that. But by doing that, they're gaining access to their raw materials. And the way that they're doing this is they're undercutting what the US and Europe had been offering these companies, kind of giving them slightly better deals. And so, if you're a country that has resources, but you don't have the money, and um, you go to America and they say, we'll do it. We'll lend you money from the IMF at this interest rate, and then you hire our companies and we'll build you the roads and the infrastructure and things like that. And then China comes in and says, oh, we'll lend you money at a lower rate and we'll build the stuff for cheaper. These people are deciding to go with China. And so through that, China has locked down much of the lithium in the world. So lithium's share of the market for lithium ion batteries could be as high as 80%. Six of the 10 largest EV battery producers are based in China. One of them, KATL, and that's one of the major suppliers of batteries to Tesla, makes 3 out of every 10 EV batteries globally. And so they said an electric car has between 30 and 60 kilos of lithium. And it's estimated that, in about 10 years, we'll need about 500,000 metric tons of unrefined lithium a year for EV production if um, if we ramp up like we expect. And that's more than the entire global supply. So what's happening is with this new bill, they're trying to get the supply of lithium and lithium refining and the sourcing back to countries with which we have a good relationship with, which strategically makes sense. I mean, there's like good and bad things to that. It's good because it would be good to have a supply domestically or with countries we have a good relationship with. The bad thing is once you start separating yourself economically from people that are sort of your enemies, then the likelihood of actual war goes way up. Um, because what we know is free trade or trade between countries, even if they're not on good terms, is known to prevent war. Because when you go into war, there's not only the human cost of war, but there's the economic cost of war. And if you're going to war with one of your major trading partners, that really hurts. And people don't want to do that. Right now, China is one of our major trading partners, and if we go to war with them, they don't want to go to war with us, and we don't want to go with war with them because economically it would cripple both of us because they need us and we need them. But once we start separating ourselves economically from them, strategically it makes it better that if we do go to war, we're insulated from that. But then the likelihood of us going to war is higher. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Um, but anyways, this was the article that I thought was the best. There's some group called Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. They put out a article several days ago, August 4th, 2022, and they were kind of talking about this bill before it passed. Um, and they were talking about the bill says not less than two-thirds of the critical minerals used in electric vehicles should be extracted and processed locally in the U.S. or with a free trade agreement partner or recycled in the U.S. It includes provisions to ramp this up requirement to 80% in 2026 and 100% in 2029. To be eligible, batteries have to contain a level of critical minerals extracted or processed in any country that the U.S. has a free trade agreement with or recycled in the United States. Okay, so then they give a tax break across the supply chain to help increase the supply chain. They're doing what they can to localize the critical mineral supply, and that's like good and bad. You can think of it two ways. But the major problem is they want this to start happening in uh, 2024, and that's just not realistic because this place is saying it takes 7 years to build a mine and a refining plant. And so you need like a decade to switch your supply chain over. You can't do it in a year. That just doesn't happen. And with China controlling, um, basically 70% of the raw materials refining and 77% of the world's capacity and 60% of the world's component manufacturing, this was in 2020. You cannot flip a switch and go to all supply from domestic supplies or from countries we have a free trade agreement with. Like you can't flip a switch and do that overnight. It takes time to build mines, to build refining capacity, to build component capacity. You could build a battery plant. I mean, Tesla's done that. They're building those gigafactories, but you're still gonna have to source your raw materials from the people that have it. Currently, that's China. And if you want to, like there is that big lithium mine that's being planned in Colorado, and then the Salton Sea theoretically has lots of lithium, but those take years to come online. It's not going to come online in a year. That's just not happening. Um, so basically, this is what we're looking at right now. China has 81% of the world's cathode manufacturing capacity, 91% of the world's anode capacity, and 679% of the world's lithium ion battery capacity. Currently, the US has 0.16% of the cathode, 0.27% of the anode, and 5.5% of the lithium ion battery capacity. And then also dominates global lithium refining and processing. US and Canada currently refine 3 and 3.5% of the world's lithium and cobalt compared to 59 and 75%. Um, so basically, what they're saying here at this place is this EV, if you want to domesticate or localize battery supply, which for strategic reasons we don't want to stay at 0.16%. I mean, that's just crazy. It has to be higher than this. That's a good thing, and this bill is trying to encourage that by trying to bring production and mining and refining back to ourselves or with countries we have a good relationship with. But you can't expect them to do it in 2024. That's just not realistic. So the way that it's currently written, not only does Aptera not qualify, it's very likely that almost no cars qualify for this. And we won't know because the way that it works is the manufacturer has to like submit this large amount of paperwork to the IRS and to the government to try to prove that they're sourcing their materials, and it's going to go on a case by case basis. And there's very likely after this bill passes, they're going to realize, oh my goodness, what do we just do? Almost no cars qualify for this. Like basically, we just shot ourselves in the foot. And instead of encouraging EV buying, we've discouraged it by getting rid of the current tax credits for it. So they'll probably try to do waivers, and they do waivers on a case by case basis, but that's like a really crappy way of handling it because waivers are essentially cronyism. They just like hand them out to the companies that they like and don't hand them out to the companies they don't like. And so that's a terrible way of doing it essentially. It's just like it's whoever bribes the people better or has a better relationship with them gets the waivers. It would be better if it was written in a way that was consistent and people could actually meet the requirements by law of it, and you don't need waivers and get away from that. So, like I said, I don't think that our little campaign to try to get the three-wheeled edition put into the bill, I think that's a long shot, but it was worth a try. But the flip side of it is Aptera is not getting the credit, and probably neither is anyone else. I mean, there is a small chance that certain cars may make it. The Model 3, if they have batteries made in the Nevada Gigafactory, might get half the credit because at least the battery components are being made in the US and their final assemblies in the US and they meet the price requirements. So, like the Model 3 and Model Y, they might make it. And then the Ford Mach E might make it and then the Jeep Wrangler might make it. But those are like maybe 3 or 4 cars might make like half the credit. Maybe. We don't know. It's unlikely, depending on how strictly they're interpreting this bill. Because if they say that no parts can come from China, that essentially makes it not gonna happen. Because at some point in the supply chain, it's so globalized, at least a little bit of the lithium or cobalt or nickel is going to come from China, has been refined there or mined there or something like that. So I think these articles are basically right. No electric vehicles qualify for the tax credit, or these electric vehicles don't exist. They're theoretical, and I think that's a problem. I don't think they've thought this through extremely well, but that's often the case for these bills that go through. Okay, well, tell me what you guys think in the comments. Look forward to reading them. Thanks, as always, to our supporting members. Hopefully, Aptera is going to release more than this teaser soon, maybe tomorrow. I'll definitely be reporting about it if they do. And thanks for watching and have a great day, guys.